Hi, I'm Assistant Professor Aditi Mathur, International Schools of Business Management, Suresh Kanviha University, Jaipur. And today, in this video lecture, we'll be understanding demand and few basic concepts associated with the word. Now let us just see what all topics which we are going to cover in this video lecture. We'll be understanding the difference between desire and demand. What is quantity demanded? We will also discuss the difference between demand and quantity demanded. We will also understand demand schedules, individual demand schedule, individual demand curve, market demand schedule, and market demand curve. So now let us just start with our first topic, that is desire versus demand. We all have understood till this video lecture unlimited wants and desires, but we have limited resources, right? So, can we all accomplish or achieve or buy whatever we desire or whatever we want in our life? No, because of an unlimited resources, and one of the unlimited resources is the capital. So desire becomes demand only when you are ready to spend the money so that you can buy what you are desiring. And it can be any commodity, any good, or any services. Right? So your desire becomes demand only when you are ready to spend the money. Only the readiness to spend the money is the criteria to say that I want something or I'm demanding something. No, two more elements are needed to say that your desire is shifted towards the demand. The first is the ability to buy. That means the sufficient purchasing power to buy that particular commodity, good, or service. And the second element is your willingness to spend the money, right? Without your willingness, you cannot create a demand. Let's take an example and understand the concept of demand. Let's assume that you all are thirsty, right? And you have a desire or you want to have a chill glass of cold drink, right? To buy that chill glass of cold drink, you should have money with you. And if you have the sufficient money, you should be willing to pay and get that chill glass of water. Until and unless you are willing to spend, you cannot say that you are demanding of some commodity. So the things required for creating a demand is number one, desire to buy that commodity. Number two, sufficient purchasing power. And number three, which is very important, a willingness of that particular person to spend to buy that commodity. So, what is the definition of demand? Definition of demand can be said that it refers to the desire to buy a commodity backed up with a sufficient purchasing power and willingness to buy that product. So, what is the difference between demand and quantity demanding? So, demand refers to the quantity of a commodity that a customer is ready to buy at a different possible prices of that product. So, let us just take an example and understand. Let's assume that we all want to buy commodity X, right? And we said, or we are saying that I want to buy 10 units of X only if it is 5 per unit. Or I will buy 8 units if it is 6 per unit. Or I will buy product X 6 units if the prices are 7. So what I'm saying is that I am giving all the quantity which I'm ready to buy at different levels of the prices. That means what I'm ready to buy at 5 what I'm ready to buy at 6 rupees, what I'm ready to buy at 7 rupees, and so on. So quantity demanded is a short term actually, because quantity demanded is nothing but the I'll give an example of that X commodity only. So, what I am ready to purchase, if the price of that commodity is 6, that units will be my quantity demanded, right? So I am ready to buy only 8 units if my price is 6 rupees per unit. So that is your quantity demand. So when you say that you have different quantity demanded, altogether those different quantity demanded can be referred as demand. Why? Because demand is all the quantities of the commodity that a customer is ready to buy at different possible prices, right? So let us just understand what is demand schedule. Now let us just understand what do we mean by the word demand and how it is different from the word quantity demanded. They might be sounding similar to you, but trust me, they both are different. Over here, let me write all the quantity which we are ready to buy, and here in this we will write all the possible prices, right? So at 5 rupees per unit, I might buy 10 units of product X. At 6 rupees per unit, I might buy 8 units. At 7 rupees per unit, I might only refer to have 6 units of the commodity X. So whenever I am referring to the specific quantity at a specific price, this 6 when the I'm going to buy at the level of price to be 7 per unit is known as quantity demanded. Let me repeat. I'm saying when I specify my quantity against a specific price, that refers to quantity demanded. But when I tell you that all the quantities which I'm ready to buy at different price level, that means at the level of 6, 5, and 7, this all together is known as demand. So I can say with ease that demand is a broad concept in comparison to quantity demanded, because quantity demanded refers to the specific quantity at a specific price, but the demand refers to all the quantities which a customer can buy at different price levels, right? So demand will be 10, 8, 6, because they can be bought at the price of 5, 6, 7, but the quantity demanded can be either 10 units at the rate of 5, or 8 unit at the rate of 6, or 6 unit at the rate of 7 only, right? So I do hope you have understood the difference between the quantity demanded and demanded. Now let us just understand what do we mean by demand schedule. We all know what is schedule. Schedule is a table. So the same way, demand schedule is a statement in which you write all the quantity demanded at the different price level, right? So actually, the table which I have drawn over here is your demand schedule, right? Why demand schedule? because I have mentioned all the quantities which I can buy at the different price level. The demand schedule is further divided into two parts. One is your individual demand schedule, and the another one refers to your market demand schedule. Let us just first understand what do we mean by individual demand schedule. So individual demand schedule is a tabular representation of the different quantities which a customer is ready to buy at the different price level. When we study about an individual customer and when we draw a schedule for that particular customer, that refers to your individual demand schedule, right? So let's take an example that at a price level of 100, I might order 50 units. At 200, I will refer to have 40. 300, I will buy 30. 400, I will buy 20 units. And at 500, I will buy 10 units only. So this is my individual customer demand. So that's why it is an individual demand schedule. So we can conclude by saying that the prices falls, the demand increases. And as the prices increases, your demand reduces. See, when my prices over here are increasing, my demand is decreasing. Can you see? As I am shifting from 100 to 500, I am ordering only 10 units, right? So this can be easily studied when we have individual demand schedule. Now let us just understand what do we mean by individual demand curve. Individual demand curve refers to the graphical representation of our individual demand schedule, right? So whenever the schedule will be converted into a graphical representation on which your x-axis will represent different quantity demanded and y will represent different price level of x, commodity x. And when you will plot it, then we say this is your individual demand curve. Why? Because over here we will be plotting and joining the different levels of quantity and prices, and we will draw a line which will be somewhere like downward sloping, and this is your individual demand curve. So when the data is presented of an individual customer on a schedule, it refers to individual demand schedule. When that same data is referred to be drawn on a graph, it becomes a individual demand curve, right? So in this I have taken an example of gasoline and its prices. So this is how the demand curve for a particular customer is drawn at the different level of the prices what he demands, right? So ma'am, what do we mean by market demand schedule then? When you add on all the individual demands in the market, that refers to your market demand. And when you draw the schedule at the different price level, it together is known as your market demand schedule. So market demand schedule is a summation of the individual demand schedules and depicts the demand of different customers of a commodity, right, in relation to the different price levels. So let us just assume that in our market we have only two customers, customer A and customer B. When we will draft the schedule having a relationship of the demand of A with a different price level and same demand of B at that same price level, and when we will add those two demand, we say it is a market demand. So on the first column, I'm writing the prices of the commodities. On the second column, we are going to mention the quantity demanded of customer A, then the quantity demanded by customer B, and over here, when we will add all the quantity demanded by A and B at the different price levels, it will be referred as our market demand, right? So when we will add 50 and 70, we will say we will have 120 units of market demand at the price of 100 rupees, right? And when the prices will rise to 200, our market demand will be of 100 units because 40 will be demanded by customer A and 60 will be demanded by customer B, and so on, right? So the market demand schedule refers to the summation of all the individual demand, right, at the different prices, right? And when you draw this on a graph, when you plot the data on the graph and draw the curve, that curve will be referred as your market demand curve, right? So this is how your market demand curve look like. When you add the quantity demand of A and B, and when you plot it, you get your market demand curve, right? So the market demand curve is a graphical representation of the market demand schedule. The x-axis represents the market demand in units, whereas your y-axis represents the prices of the commodity. The market demand curve shows the relationship between the price of the goods and the quantity demanded by all the customers. And always remember, we are always following the iter paribus concept, right? So now let us just see the difference between individual demand and the market demand. So individual demand refers to the quantity demanded of a commodity by a single firm or a customer, whereas market demand refers to the quantity demanded of a commodity by all the firms and all the customers in the market. Individual demand is shown by the market demand schedule and market demand curve. Market demand is shown by the market demand schedule and market demand curve. Individual demand is a component of a market demand, whereas your market demand is aggregation of all the individual demand. So I can say that individual demand is to your individual demand. The individual demand curve is relatively steeper, whereas your market demand curve is flatter. Why? Because there are the different quantities which is added, so it comes to the flat. Individual demand has a narrow scope as it is related to the taste and preferences of a single customer only, whereas market demand is a broader scope concept as it is related to the taste and preference of all the customers prevailing in the market. The individual demand represents the different quantities of a commodity by an individual at a different prices in the market, whereas your market demand represents different quantities of a commodity preferred by all the customers at different prices in the market. Now, I do hope you will be able to understand the difference between the individual demand and the market demand. So now let's just have a quick recap of all what we have studied in this video lecture. The first concept which we studied was your desire versus demand, in which we said desire becomes demand only when you have money and you are willing to buy that particular product, right? If you want to have a particular car, you should have that much amount of money to buy that car, and you should be willing to pay to buy that car, right? If you want to go abroad for your higher education, you should have that much amount of money to go, right? And you should be willing to go abroad. It is not just like that without your willingness to spend, you are saying that I am creating a demand. No, to create a demand, you need to have three things. Number one, desire to buy. Number two, sufficient purchasing power. Number three, willingness to spend the money so that you can buy your particular good, particular services, or a particular commodity. Then we studied difference between demand and quantity demanded. We said quantity demand refers to the specific quantities to be purchased at a very specific price, right? We took the example in which we saw that if we say that I want to buy or I want to demand the 6 units of commodity X when the prices are 7 per unit, that means you are referring to a quantity demanded. But whereas demand refers to all the quantities which a commodity can be asked for by a customer at the different possible prices. So in this example, so for me, the demand will be 10, 8, and 6 at the different rates, that is 5, 6, 7 respectively. So I can also say that the demand is broad and quantity demand is narrow. Demand is equals to summation of different quantity demanded at different level. Then we understood what do we mean by demand schedule. We bifurcated the demand schedule into two parts. One was our individual demand schedule and the another one was our market demand schedule. We looked at the concept of our individual demand schedule, in which we took the example of commodity X, and we saw that when a particular customer, an individual, demand the different quantity at different level, and when it is depicted in a form of a table, it is known as your individual demand schedule. And when that table is used to plot the points, plot the ratio of the quantity demanded at different price level by an individual customer on a graph, and when you join those points and draw a line which draw a curve, and that curve is known as your individual demand curve, right? So individual demand curve is graphical representation of individual demand schedule, on which the x-axis represents the different quantity demanded and y-axis represents your different price level. Then we understood the market demand schedule, in which we said that the market demand schedule is the summations of all the individual demand schedule by different customers in the market, right? So your market demand in this example is equals to summation of the quantity demanded by A and B at different price level. And when you draw the same on a graph, we get our market demand curve. So market demand curve is what? Is a graphical representation of the market demand schedule. Again, in this also, the X represents the market demanded of the commodity, that is in units, and Y represents the prices of the commodity. We deeply discussed the differences between your individual demand and market demand. We discussed the differences on the basis of the meaning, on the basis of the diagram or what it depicts, on the basis of the relationship between them, on the basis of the slope of the curves, which is steeper or the flatter, on the basis of the scope and what it represents. To understand this concept, you can refer to these two books. These two books have a very good language to understand the concept with ease. You can also refer to the any of the web pages available. Just check the credentials before you choose a particular website for your study. Just check what all things are there, and then definitely you can refer to that web page. Let us just have a quick recap of what we have studied today with the help of the MCQs. So I have prepared 10 MCQ questions, and let's check how many of them are correct for you at the first glance. So let us just have the first two MCQ questions on your screen. Question number 3 and question number 4. So in question number 4, you have to identify the one of the three elements which all together help you to call a demand. So I have given you two elements. You have to identify the third missing element. Let's move ahead with our question number 5 and question number 6. Let's check on question number 7 and question number 8. And the last two MCQ questions of the day, question number 9 and question number 10. Let us just see all the questions once again before we see the answers. So the question number 2 was, normally a demand curve will have which shape? You have to select the best option. Question number 1 was, the quantity demanded is what? The question number 3 asked for the market demand. The question number 4 asked you to identify the missing element. The question number 5 was to identify the demand curve slope. How does it slopes in general? In the question number 6, you had to select what is the correct answer to a fall in price of a commodity leads to. In question number 7, you have to identify that the relationship between the law in the law of demand, the relationship between what and quantity demanded. In question number 8, you have to identify the basic assumption of the law of the demand. In question number 9, you have to identify what refers to a specific quantity to be purchased against a specific price of a commodity. And in question number 10, you had to identify what is a summation of individual demand schedule and what it depicts the demand of a different customers of a commodity in relations to its prices. I do hope you have answered all the 10 questions. So let's check the answers. So the correct answer question for the question number 1 was option A. For question 2, it's option C. For question 3, it's option A. The correct answer for question number 4 and 5 is option D. For question number 6, the correct answer is B. For question number 7, it's C. For question number 8 also, the correct answer was option C. For question number 9, the correct option was option B. And for question number 10, the correct option is option A. I do hope that you all have scored 10 on 10, right? And do hope you have understood what is the difference between desire, demand, quantity demanded, and then what do we mean by individual demand schedule, individual demand curve, market demand schedule, and market demand curve. Because these concepts become the base to study the upcoming law of demand, right? So when you know the terminologies of how to use those terms, then only you'll be able to understand the law with very ease, right? So that's all for today's video lecture. I do hope you have understood the concept which we tried to teach you in this lecture. Thank you and happy learning.